Welcome to the future of nuclear power. I'm Phil Zerang, VP of Strategic Partnerships with Nuclearn. Conversation today is going to be a great one. With us, we've got a Division I competitive water skier, a classically Suzuki-trained non-traditional violinist, a climber of Kilimanjaro, a recent skydiver, an aspiring scuba diver, a Wausau Rotary Scholar, a proud Wisconsin Badger with a BS in nuclear engineering, a member of Forbes 30 Under 30, Miss Wausau Outstanding Teen 2016, Miss Harbor City's Outstanding Teen 2017, Miss Wisconsin Outstanding Teen 2017, Miss Badgerland, i.e. Miss Wisconsin, the 95th Miss America, a designer of reactor fuel cores, a lover of Mexican food, the pre-job brief, national parks, and Hershey chocolate bars, and a hater of the no news is good news mindset, preconceived notions, and chewing gum.
I love this. Is like impressive. You really went into the archives for some of this stuff.
I did. Hello, Grace Stanke. Great to have you with us.
Hi there. Yes, I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be a ton of fun. Now that you've got, the entire pageant history plus some of the other stuff. Where did you even find the chewing gum? Because that is I hate chewing gum, but I feel like that's not something I talk about a lot.
It was a super low-key thing you said in one of your interviews.
But you caught it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, so thank you for being here, and thank you to Constellation. And I would like to also thank Constellation for the dedication recently of 3 Mile Island to the Crane Clean Energy Center. Chris Crane was a family friend of mine. My dad and Chris worked together early in Chris's career and stayed in touch ever since. And Chris was a big supporter of mine and a helper to my career and my time at Constellation and beyond. We took his sudden passing pretty hard, and I've spoken to a lot of friends in the industry as well as former colleagues at Constellation that we miss him, his impact to the industry, and more importantly, his impact to all of us that got to know him and worked with him and benefited from his knowledge, his support, his strength. For the Crane family, I don't think you'll ever know the full impact of all the people that he helped and he changed, and all for the better. So fitting and for the future of nuclear power to start with a reconditioning of dedicated to Chris Crane. So thank you, Constellation, and thank you for being part of that representation, Grace.
Yeah, it really is. It really is an exciting time, and having that honor for Chris Crane, I think, is really incredible. I never had the opportunity to meet him or get to know him in any capacity. When I first started back with my original first job with Constellation / Exelon, it was at the time, he still was the CEO, and you could just tell that there was so much respect and admiration for him amongst the employees. As I was a co-op, I was the bottom of the barrel, the lowest of the low, doing the data retrieval. I get it, all right. But people there really had a high level of respect for him. And it's really incredible to have his name along with a tremendous win for the entire nuclear industry, because that's what his entire career was really setting the tone in a positive light for nuclear as a whole. And I'm so excited with the restart with the Chris Crane Clean Energy Center. It's fun because I'm in the PWR core design group, so we have all of our plants that we normally discuss in our weekly call, and now we've added on the CCEC, the Crane Clean Energy Center. So it's really an exciting time overall.
Well, I'm glad you dropped that. I thought we might get into a fight on Team PWR, BWR, because I am a PWR guy.
Okay, so it's a funny story because I initially really wanted to do BWR reactor engineering. That was pre-Miss America, pre all of this, actually seeing that I could maybe do some comms work as part of my job. Prior to all of that, I really wanted to be a BWR reactor engineer. That was the number one thing that I wanted. It ended up not coming to fruition because I ended up learning that I really enjoyed comms and that I could work this into my career in some capacity. So I ended up going on the PWR core design side just because logistically it works out a lot better for this relationship between engineering work and working on comms and policy and advocacy and all that other good stuff, right? But I still have such a soft spot, I guess, in my heart for BWRs. I still like them.
Yeah. So let's get into that a little bit. So 2023 was a
Yeah.
whirlwind year of service and that you've concluded. You jumped into 2024 with like your kind of first year of legit adulting
Yeah,
post
yeah, I learned way too
post
much about
degree.
taxes and healthcare this year. Not fun. Don't recommend.
So how is 2024? What are the things you wish you knew? As a father of two girls in college, I'm selfishly asking this question about what you wish you knew coming out and going into the workforce, and then biggest learnings and surprises in the last few months.
Yeah, coming out of college and going into the workforce. So first of all, I think it's important that I to like recognize my college experience was so out of the norm for literally in comparison to any student because I had COVID freshman year and then I took a co-op, so I took time off of school for a bit to work and then I went back to school and then I won Miss Wisconsin and then I won Miss America. So like I had one like traditional college year and that was my junior year. So I don't have a ton of like I can't speak to the typical experience coming out of college, but the one thing that I know that I shared in was the unknown, right? Was the fear of okay, what is next? What do I want to do with my life, you know? I majored in something, but now what? How do I become a full-fledged adult because I still don't feel like one, right? The biggest thing for me is I focused on instead of like picking out a specific job position that I wanted, right? I never was a person that said, when I grow up, I want to be a nuclear fuels engineer, you know, whatever level. Like, I never said that. Nobody did, I'm pretty sure. But what I did was I focused on, okay, what do I love to do and how can I use that to help people? And I do love math. I love science. I love engineering work. However, I know that it's not something that I'll be able to do for the next 40 years of my life and my career. I can do it for a little bit. I enjoy it. I love it and I appreciate it, but I'm not sure if it's right for me for like becoming a technical expert, right? A PhD is kind of off the charts for me, in my opinion. But then I also love communications work and policy and working with people and sharing stories and highlighting what good that the nuclear industry has to offer. So I really focused on that and crafting that into a position that I could do and a position that was of interest to the industry as a whole. Now, that's also like a pretty unique circumstance. And the one thing that I've been seeing a lot as even right now on the engineering side of my role is there's a lot of ways that I've been able to incorporate this comms and advocacy work as if I were like not having this job, right? Working with employee resource groups to organize school visits and access a budget to be able to provide rad dress outs for students to try on. You know, we've got nuclear science next week, and I'm super stoked because I'm going to schools and like we have these XL rad dress outs, right? Because there never is like normal sizes of rad dress outs. I've never been to a plant that has mediums and larges and small. Like, no, it's like XL, triple XL, like, and that's fine. It's great, whatever. But I'm stoked because we're bringing these to schools and having kids like try them on and they get exposure to what it is to be in a nuclear engineering type position. Um, so overall, you know, that was a very long-winded answer, but overall, not focusing so much on the end goal, but focusing on the things that I have right now and how can I use them to make a better place tomorrow is really what I wish I had known more and had focused more on during those like first initial months of like, what is going on right now? Like I have to figure out how to move and get my own healthcare and buy a car and like all of this stuff that's going on, while also simultaneously trying to set up a good foundational first couple of years for my career. But just focusing on what is the issue today, what can I do today with the resources I have, and just start there. Tomorrow is a whole nother day. It can be that.
Did you pass your dress out practical the first time?
I did. Okay, I'm corporate engineer, so I don't actually have to do it, which is so sad. It's so sad because like I put together this presentation to the kids and I laughed because I had to reach out to a couple of like reactor engineers and stuff like that. So I'm like, can you just verify that this is right? Because I've only done rad dress out once, and it was when I was at Palo Verde actually. So I'm like, I've only done this once. I've never done it at a Constellation plant. Like, can we just verify that this is the process here?
Yeah. Well, I know your schedule is very, very advanced for most folks, but one of the great things about nuclear power is you can have a emergency response job, you can have a regular
Mhm.
job, and you can have an outage job. And I would definitely recommend at least once signing up for something lower containment, refuel floor cleanup,
Yeah.
something that you can spend a week doing, getting to really get firsthand experience. It's unique and it is definitely a community. Once you're in the nuclear workforce, it's there's a lot of ways to explain to somebody you work in nuclear without saying you work in nuclear.
That is true. That is very true.
So now that you're, out of school, you're in the workforce full time, you're still meeting lots of people in your current company as well as still doing outreach. I'm curious, what's the bigger flex, being Miss America or designing reactor cores?
Okay. I feel like in general, when I'm talking to the general public, honestly, designing reactor cores is the bigger flex now. Miss America is not necessarily what it used to be in the 80s and 90s, and that's fine. It's cool with me. But I think like internally within the nuclear world, people are like, wait. Oh, designing reactor cores. Okay, great. I did that 20 years ago. That's not new. So in that aspect, it's really fun because there's in some worlds one is more of a flex than the others.
I get that. I might selfishly do the same thing when I'm on a plane and they ask, "What do you
Mhm.
do?" Well, we build AI software to automate nuclear power. And it's just like, that's two
You get the
things we
big
can't.
wide eyes. I had a gentleman that I was sitting next to. So this was right after Lollapalooza this year, so a big music festival. He worked in like the medical side of it and is somebody who that's what he does. He goes around to these festivals and is one of the like the first responders and medical individuals that attends it. So I'm like, dude, you must deal with the genuinely most insane people. Like drugs, everything, we don't need to get into that too much. But then like I tell him I'm a nuclear engineer and he kind of like stops and it's like 30 seconds goes by of just complete silence, right? I just let it simmer. I think there's a lot of power in silence, okay? But I just let it simmer and he looks at me and he's like, does that scare you? And I'm like, dude, you just told me about how you had a crackhead charging you with a knife. Like, what do you mean? I was just like, okay, we have two very different jobs here. I'm more scared of yours, though. I can promise you that. It was a fun conversation and a really good educational opportunity, though. But yeah, that's my little total tangent there of entertaining stories of saying I'm a nuclear engineer.
That's super interesting. So that's another interesting question. Which one do you think saved more lives? Cobalt 61 for medical instrument sterilization or Americium 241 for smoke detectors?
Oh, okay. I'd have to go cobalt just because, like, there's got to be more surgeries done than fires, hopefully. Fingers crossed. I'm hoping. That'd be an interesting statistic. Because then how many surgeries are life-saving, That's also
Yeah.
something that you've got to consider is how many of them are successful on a daily basis.
And how long
I'm
have they
going
been
cobalt.
doing
What would
that?
you go? What would you go?
I want to go Americium just because
Mm,
it's fire has been such a big deal for so much longer than medical sterilization through nuclear.
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is that okay? So follow-up question, are fires like a really big issue in Arizona? I'm wondering if this is like a cultural thing too.
Not so much, yes, certainly in the northern parts of the state where we have more
Mm.
foliage. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
not a lot to burn in the desert. And so,
that's true. Okay,
so
that's true. Because that's what I'm wondering. Because I'm like, okay, growing up in the upper Midwest where we don't really have wildfires, we don't have a ton of issues with fires. My
yeah,
first instinct and exposure that I'm exposed to is really just sort of more the medicine side. But that's
yeah,
interesting. Cool.
yeah, yeah. Bigger misconception, nuclear power or Miss America?
Okay. I feel like Miss America's probably the bigger misconception now, like as of today, because there still is such a huge stereotype with Miss America, and people don't even want to talk about it, which is fine. We're that doesn't, I feel like I say that and that could sound like rude towards me, but it's not, I promise. But nuclear power, when I go out and talk to people, right, and I say I'm a nuclear engineer, or I work in nuclear energy, or what do you think of when I say the word nuclear? People usually think of energy. They think of electricity. They think of power plants. They think of clean electricity, reliable energy. And that's like really unheard of. Right now we've got over 54% of Americans support nuclear power in some capacity in the United States. And that's just like incredible to be at that point in time where it's not so much a misconception anymore, in my personal opinion, as much as it is just a lack of education and a lack of like people going out and seeking the knowledge. Sometimes you have to bring the knowledge to them, because especially like Gen Zers like me and a bunch of other, young kids, all we do is scroll TikTok where the information is just given to us. It's not so much like seeking it out. So how can we create organic content and organic information that is presented to people in that way, where it's not so much like people deliberately Googling what is the benefits of nuclear energy, what is the risks of nuclear energy. It's creating something that reaches out to them through their avenues of interest.
Yeah, what do you think is driving the adoption I imagine it's a number of things, but I'm interested in your take on it. I know the no news is good news. You've talked about that in the past. I'm a second generation in nuclear. My dad would talk about it all the time, and his go-to was, if you used electricity for 100% of your energy needs your entire lifetime, the radioactive waste would fit in a coffee cup. And I know we're using a lot more electricity now than we used to, but I think our coffee cups are bigger too. So I think the analogy still holds
It
up,
works.
but I
Yeah.
like a lot of the infographics that I'm seeing on social media and other places with, the gummy bears, the fuel pellets versus the barrels of oil versus the train cars of coal, and the amount of land and water it takes for nuclear versus the amount of land it takes for solar and wind. And I think there's a lot of these comparisons that are driving education, but you also have a lack of choices in terms of AI, electrification, EV, both driving demand significantly, and pretty strongly committed climate goals of a lot of the heavy electric customers that they don't necessarily want to go back on. And then there's the national security side of AI and maintaining superiority as a nation, almost Cold War style, in that space. So it's like we have to have electricity for security at this point, and we don't want to go back to more fossil. Wind and solar hasn't really been the panacea that we hoped it would be. Is it truly like we love nuclear? Is it, well, it's our best next option?
I think more of the latter right now, but that is a pathway and an avenue into, okay, we love nuclear, right? Historically, so ask me a year ago what I would think the driving factor is. I would say definitely those intense climate goals. And honestly, Gen Z's generational issue is climate change, right? That is one of the biggest push towards clean energy is young people saying, hey, what are we doing about climate change? Okay, we're seeing EVs, we're seeing reductions in sort of household appliances, we're seeing the electrification of everything. But now, okay, where's that electricity all coming from with these EVs, with these new electric stoves or whatever fancy kitchen equipment people are using nowadays, right? I guess those aren't really that new, but you get my point, okay? So in that capacity, people are asking the question of where's our electricity coming from? Now combine that with the events of the past, honestly, like 7 months, year with AI and data centers. I'm not worried about a career in nuclear engineering anymore. One story that I've really begun opening up and telling people about is, honestly, even through the end of 2023, I still had in the back of my mind that lingering question of, is my career going to be working in decommissioning? Is my career really going to be just struggling and scraping to keep the existing fleet going? Or is it going to be a growth, right? What is that going to look like? After starting work and seeing some of the things that are going on, thanks to, as much as I hate to say it, I sit there and say, like, thanks to the tech bros and the finance bros, like, I'm not worried anymore. I honestly am not worried anymore with things like the Crane Clean Energy Center reopening, Palisades reopening, Amazon and Google and Microsoft, all of these massive tech companies are making investments in nuclear power. I found it interesting. Amazon's got listings for nuclear engineers to be hired there. I'm like, that's a new one. But it really goes to show that we have this interest from the general public, one, because they care about the climate change. And now we're getting interest from actual commercial industry, privatized commercial industry, not just government, not just grants, funds, whatever set aside. It's coming from commercialized private industry. And that is really sort of creating this perfect circumstance that nuclear can grow. Nuclear can be a leading source of energy and a leading source of clean energy for America continuing forward.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting, and you're seeing some creative ideas. I think it was Dow that announced a partnership with nuclear for heat, not even for
Mm-hmm.
electricity. So I'm missing
Yeah,
that side.
yeah.
But you mentioned people don't really know where their electricity comes from. You're certainly getting that message out. People are starting to pay attention. Which is the bigger misconception? Where your electricity comes from, or the difference between a crown and a tiara?
Okay, I didn't even know the difference between a crown and a tiara until I became Miss America. So I don't think that one matters too much. But I guess like where the electricity comes from is really interesting because I think a lot of people they'll drive by one solar field that's within 40 miles of their hometown and they're like, I get my electricity from there. But then actually taking the time to look at, okay, what time of day? Are you actually getting electricity from that one solar field that's 40 miles away from your house? Like let's actually look at it and see if that power is coming to your home. There's a lot of typical quick judgments when people see the facilities nearby that don't necessarily always hold true. So I encourage everyone to look into where their power comes from. It was one of my favorite conversations during the Miss America prep process, right? I'm working with a lot of people who don't know a lot about electricity or energy, but they have to ask questions about it. They're doing mock interviews with me and they're doing all sorts of stuff like that while we're preparing for the Miss America competition. And one of them was from California, and she lives near San Onofre and like all of these other sort of places where they've got like, ooh, nuclear bad, scary, ah. And it was so fun to like work with her, and she's one of my good friends now to this day about energy, about electricity. One of my favorite things is her son. I get her son's sixth grade school projects all the time about nuclear energy now. And I'm like, this kid is single-handedly going to get California to support nuclear energy more. And I love it. That's exactly what we need is people to start the conversation right in their homes. Thanksgiving's around the corner. Start the family Thanksgiving fight. Talk about where energy comes from. Talk about nuclear electricity.
So which is the bigger mountain to climb, Kilimanjaro or getting youth like your friend in California more involved in STEM?
Ah, the youth. So Kilimanjaro, hot take. It's of the seven summits, it's the easiest. Like, I guess that's not a hot take. That's a pretty commonly known thing. So Kilimanjaro is just like a really long hike. So as long as you're okay not showering for 7 days, you'll be fine. But getting the youth to support nuclear really isn't a huge issue either, though, in my personal opinion, because when I'm working with young people, that's the audience that is usually the most open and most excited to learn about nuclear energy. What we need is immediate action today coming from people that are not of that generation. Unfortunately, we don't have 20, 21, 22-year-olds running billion-dollar companies that can make the bold leadership moves that we need. So it's about creating this bridge between people in power right now and people with the ability to guide these decisions, and then also having the support coming from the young generation to fill the workforce demand and to fill it well. That's a whole nother thing that I'm not even going to get into because I can talk a lot about that too, but it is an important thing to note that it goes both ways.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of encouragement. I mentor and coach a first robotics high school robotics team.
Oh,
Shout out
fun.
4146 Sabercat Robotics.
Woo!
And we have a lot of freshmen. We had a big senior class last year, and we have a lot of freshmen this year. And one of the things we get about is how hard engineering is hard, CAD is hard, math is hard, and these kids can do hard things. And hard things is a necessary. All the best things in the world to do, that are worth doing are the hard things. So,
Yeah.
um, what are you hearing? You talk to probably a lot more folks in that space than I do. You get that sentiment. What is the best way to, make engineering cool to get kids wanting to do the hard things?
Well, for me personally, I looked at my personal like thought process and how I operated as a human. So like I hated in English class when I got papers back and my teacher would be like, "Oh, you're almost there. Like you're so close, you're almost there." I'm like, "No, I'm either right or I'm wrong." And in math, you're either right or you're wrong. Like there's no you're almost there. It's either right or wrong. And I really liked that because at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, what's the thing that's going to drive me up a wall to the point of frustration that I don't enjoy it anymore? It's going to be the you're almost there conversation, not the hey, you're wrong. Okay, let's see how we can fix this and let's find a way to move forward, right? I think that math and science is a lot more than just being something that's hard. It is a different thought process and it's going to work differently for everybody. It's about finding what strengths you have and what things you enjoy doing to move forward and understand how you work as a human, which sounds like super deep and intellectual when I'm like, dude, I'm 22 years old. This is me just living life, figuring it out day by day. But it is something that's really important is to know like, okay, how can I receive feedback? What do I prefer when I am wrong? Because inevitably everyone will be. But math and science, I think, is really cool overall. It has some really awesome ways of applying patterns to the world around us. It's a way to quantify things in our everyday life. I thought it was so fun growing up because my dad was a civil engineer. And when I took statics and dynamics, I actually understood how the bridges that he built worked on a deeper level then. Like I could do the math. And I was like, is this it? Like this is so cool to see how I can use math and science to help people live their everyday life. So overall, I think it comes down to every person has a different approach. Every person has a different thought process and approach to every situation, but it's figuring out which sort of mindset are you mostly going to use moving forward and how can you use that. And then it's also cool to do big things. I think it's interesting you brought up hard things are, yes, hard, but it's really cool to do big things. And like this is like a total side tangent, but I feel like America as a whole has gotten so stuck in the little itty bitty details with some of our issues that we have as a country. And it's like, okay, can we get back to doing big things? Like it's not that hard. We just have to do it.
So on engineering school, they're
Mhm.
very good at teaching us the skills that we need to do engineering type. You got an awful lot of polished communication, social intelligence, emotional intelligence training through your extracurriculars and through the things you did outside of your degree. Which do you think is a bigger deal in terms of effectiveness and career for an engineer? Is it IQ or is it social intelligence?
I think it's understanding when you need the other is the most important thing. It's possible to have both. It's possible to be better at one than the other, right? It's going to be different for every single person. But I think as someone who, like, I know that I won't be, that guy known for that specific technical question. I'm not going to be that guy. And that's okay. I'm fine with that. But what I can do is help that guy communicate his technical designs in a way that one, we can convince the general public why this is needed, how it's necessary, how can it be used, but also communicate that to legislators, to policymakers, to staff members of federal and state law legislators, lawmakers, whatever you want to call them, right? Politicians, so we can get the support for the science that we need, because that's what we need to get back to is the science, and then blending that science with accurate communication and truthful communication. It's got to come from a place of technical knowledge and it's got to come from a place of trust. And for me personally, I try to do a little bit of both. I want to understand the science and the technology. I want to be able to do it myself. But I also want to be able to work with anybody of any different background to understand it.
Yeah, there's so much lack of understanding, and not just where your power comes from, but how it works. And it's huge on the nuclear side. with the lack of branding that's gone on for 60
Mhm.
years, but it's equally challenging on the utility side and on the distribution and transmission side. I was in an Uber on the way to a distribution conference, and the Uber driver said, "Oh yeah, my neighbor got solar. It's great. They just store the power on, I mean, like all his extra power, they pay him for it, and they just store it on the power lines until he needs it." Like,
I don't think it works
exactly.
like that. I
Yeah.
don't think it works
So
like that.
yeah, so no,
Yeah.
that's not quite right. And so that communication, I tried to explain it. I don't know if I changed the world, getting across to my one driver that really didn't want to hear my 20-minute car ride of how electricity works.
Yeah.
But but that also gets me thinking about what motivates, right? What are those intrinsic things that motivate, and how that's different generationally? My dad went into nuclear power um, because it paid better, and he had a young family, and he was still in school, and it was the thing that was going to pay the bills. And I went into nuclear power um, for similar reasons. I have two daughters, and neither one of them are interested in careers from a status or money perspective. I have a daughter in Africa that's in Africa right now, following animals around and doing some great work with animals of concern and following things. I've got another daughter that is in school to study health sciences and nursing. Um,
That's amazing.
yeah, great careers. They chose those based on what they feel they can contribute to the world, where their passion is at, what they want to do, and that's fantastic. When I started learning more about you, following what you were doing and learning more about the programs you came out of, this idea of social impact initiative, I can't shake it from my head. I've probably talked to a dozen people about this idea of individual development plan that every corporate HR company requires you to fill out in your annual review process of, the classic, where do you want to be in 5 years? It's great for the ambitious person, but the senior person that is like where they want to be, or the person that wants to do something totally different but doesn't want to admit it to their manager, this idea, the person that is looking to make change, to do something, the idea of having a social impact initiative personally for either your team, your company, the world, whatever scale that you want to sign up for, and then asking the question of yourself, what kind of person do I need to be? And therefore, what kind of skills and knowledge do I need to acquire in order to make that change, to see that impact initiative come to life? What do you think about that now that you're in the corporate game and you're doing IDPs and these traditional things? How do you see your experience with other programs and that are more socially conscious?
I was literally just working on my IDP this morning. And it's interesting though, because like I struggle with an IDP. I struggle like putting some of these things on paper, but I do think it's important to still know it. And I think my social impact initiative, it's interesting because okay, so you had mentioned that I competed as a teen and everything. As a teen, I was not going into nuclear engineering at the time. My dream job or career or major, I had written down aerospace engineering. I wanted to be a rocket scientist because I'm just like, well, it sounds impressive, right? And I know I want to do engineering, so sure. But my social impact initiative was supporting cancer patients, right? And their families. My dad is a two-time cancer survivor. So I knew what it was like as a family member who, it's a scary time. So how can you support not only the cancer patient, but also their family unit as well? Because all of those people are in that battle together. So that versus what I had as Miss America, which was clean energy, cleaner future, two totally different things, not related in any capacity, in all honesty. And I think it's important though, because I ended up switching to clean energy, cleaner future because I knew this was something that I could talk about for hours on end. I felt so passionate about it. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to have this be at the forefront of people's minds because I thought it was the most important thing. So why, I was like, this needs to be addressed. And I think it was a great thing to be able to take that from just a passion that I knew it was the tick for me. I knew it was what would get me going, and then actually writing it down on paper and creating a plan, right? That was the thing, that writing it down and thinking about, okay, this is what ticks me. but what am I going to do about it now? That was like, I feel like such a big thing for me, not just as a nuclear engineer and like not just as the person where I am today, but just for me as a human being. It gave me sort of like this clear direction and purpose. And I didn't feel that I needed to rely upon this corporate career ladder structure that always exists, right? I didn't feel that I needed to go through and just check the boxes in order to accomplish something in life. This was how I wanted to accomplish things, and it didn't depend on checking somebody else's box. And I think that that helped me from an internal fulfillment sort of aspect. And it changes, I don't necessarily have that specific piece of paper anymore. I do still have the living document. Actually, I do go back and make some modifications to it every once in a while, just because it is something that I still deeply care about. But my environment has changed. My skills have changed. The access to resources that I have now has changed drastically. So what can I do now in the position that I am today to continue furthering this mission? So I guess like an IDP has some parallels, because the IDP cares about, what do you want, but it also cares about what you want in the context of the company. So for me personally, I love the social impact initiative type of idea just because it's about you and you only. What fulfills you? It's sort of like an IDP, but just for yourself, which I think is really cool. And I think that for me internally, it helped me find fulfillment from more than just a 9-to-5 type of job.
Yeah, I like how you said you have to write it down, because the idea of follow your passion has been in the icon the world for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sometimes, I think it's a myth that finding your passion is it's like an archaeological dig. It's if I'm going to try enough things, I'm going to search around enough places, I'm eventually going to find what my strengths and my passion are. And I think it's more of an architectural design process than archaeological. It's design your passion. Make a thesis. I think I'm passionate about this. Set some goals. Find things that are important to you. Get involved in it. See how you respond emotionally to it. Double down, triple down, go for it, and see what happens. I think that's where passion comes from. It's just momentum. It's momentum on things that you begin to care about the more you do them.
Exactly. And it's okay to fail too, I think is one thing that's important to like recognize in this process, just like the engineering process. It's okay to fail. Like, take a deep breath. It'll be okay. I think that that is such a good thing to be comfortable with, is how to fail. I think a lot about, like, this is such like a weird and not super deep thing, but it is at the same time. When I was first learning how to downhill ski, that was the first thing my brother taught me, was how to fall properly, like how to fall safely, how to recover, and how to like make sure you're not going to get a concussion when you fall when you're downhill skiing, right? And that's one thing that I'm like, okay, that's setting a good foundation for everything moving forward, because I know how to fall. I know how to do that moving forward. And I think that it's okay to hear the word no. It's okay to ask the question and hear the word no, because you know what? Then you're in the same exact spot that you started. So is it really a failure? Not really. You're just still where you are. So what's the next question you can ask until you get the answer you need?
Are there other things that we can be doing, whether it's accepting failure, asking more often? What can we do to make nuclear power jobs more interesting, more exciting, sexy, cool, awesome, the hip thing to go do?
Yeah, my hot take, I think we need to start seeing a little bit more innovation. Unfortunately, 70s seafoam green colored control rooms just aren't really that appealing to Gen Zers. The 60s are making a comeback in fashion, but we're not at the 70s, okay? We're not there yet. But I do think modernization and innovation, a lot of people struggle, committing to nuclear or committing to being involved, just because they're like, okay, well, we've seen so many generations of reactor designs happening, but how many have been built, right? We need to see more things being completed from that beginning design process and then permitting and licensing into construction and successful operation. And that to me is really going to be the thing that makes it appealing, is seeing big things get done. coming back to that whole like, it's cool to do hard things. It's a big task. It's something that I know for me, like, I could see a couple of power plants, hopefully dozens of power plants in America be built over my career and be commercially operating by the end of it. But that's the if, right? That's if I put the work in. That's if I show up every day, I'm doing the hard thing. So making sure that we have that possibility. And right now, that possibility is a lot bigger than it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago when I started in this industry. So I think that that coolness and that appeal is starting to become bigger. Just this fall, actually, and last fall in 2023, schools finally started seeing an increase in enrollment across the country. Georgia Tech, I found it interesting after Vogtle 3 opened up and came online, they saw a 50% increase in undergraduate enrollment for nuclear engineering because people are seeing things go from that start all the way to that finished product. And I think that says a lot about what we need to be focusing on as an industry in order to keep that up.
Yeah, that's great. So to absolutely put words in your mouth, what you just said was we need innovative technologies like AI in every
Uh-huh.
utility.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a question for you, right? I have like sort of a question here for you because my concern with AI right now and focusing on that as like a big workforce thing is, do you remember like what everybody said about majoring in computer science? Like I'd say between 7 and 10 years ago, and now it's an oversaturated job. Like it's just that there's so many people that are in it now. It's a struggle almost to find a job there. And granted, it's a struggle to find a job anywhere, apparently, right now. I don't really fully know the details, but that's something that I'm wondering. This is just like purely wonder, and I want it for the discussion. Will AI become oversaturated with employees and people looking to work in it, or is it going to continue to increase and meet sort of the demand needed to fill that supply?
I think the latter. I believe
Yeah.
it's going to touch every aspect. If you use a computer at all to do
Mhm.
your job, you should be using AI to help you. It's the autocorrect, but at, the level of everything you could possibly do in whether it's in design or in anything digital, it has an impact on. And I was talking to a utility last week, and they were asking about our tool stack and how we could help them, even though this wasn't a nuclear area. And it's like, absolutely, and this is how that works.
Mhm.
And they said, well, then why in the world did you start in nuclear of all places? Like to them, it was baffling. It's like, do something
Mhm.
easier. And the answer was because nuclear needs it so much. There is the lack of innovation over the years, and that's okay. I don't want to fail fast with creative ways to manipulate the reactor and the control rods. Like that is
Yeah.
a bad idea. Let's
I
let's
was
do
gonna
what
say,
let's do what
sir.
we know. Yeah, let's do what we know works, right? Let's,
Yeah.
nuclear professionalism, conservative bias. We're going to run these plants safe, secure, reliable for the long term, right? Let's keep that going for sure. But there is a ton of mundane, repetitive. I made the decision in 5 minutes. I'm going to spend 3 days writing down all the exact links and citations and documentation to justify my decision to the regulator and submit that on formal letterhead, and all of this overhead of burden of proof and requirements, eliminating all of that where the craftsman can spend more time working on their craft and less time thinking about getting ready to work and talking about working and documenting what they might be working on to documenting what they did work on to discussing what they might be doing, just getting out there and working and have all of those other tasks that are necessary for quality and safety, but have those as fingertip ready as possible, as automated as possible. And that's just on the nuclear side. So yeah, I think we'll look back on AI as just a normal part, and we'll think, generations today can't imagine what it's like to have not had a device. And this generation coming in, the generation beta and on, will say the same thing about AI. It'll be so pervasive and it'll be such a part of everyone's life, but there'll always be a human in the loop. I don't think it's a good idea to take the human out of the loop. It's just making the human 10 times more productive doing the things that they are skilled at, that they enjoy, and having automation handling the mundane, time consuming portions of what they do. That's our hope. That's what we're trying to achieve.
No,
Is
I
that
agree. I agree. I think a lot of the frustrations in people's jobs stem from sort of almost it feels like admin work, I want to say, and not to like that's not saying it's not needed, but it's just like even for me, working in sort of our records process and software, it just is not exactly the most user friendly. So figuring out ways to make that better because that alone would save an hour every day, right? Or something along those lines because, oh, it's not set up right or it hits a maximum amount of pages or whatever. Like it's just weird, finicky stuff like that that could use a lot of improvement. And I think that AI can really play a role in a lot of ways. It warms my heart to hear that you're very like set on there will always be a human involvement. And the reason I say that is I was at a conference earlier this year and it was a nuclear conference. I was sitting in the audience, and there was a panel on AI and how it can play a role in nuclear and all of this stuff. And everyone in the audience, not everyone, that's a very broad term, but people in the audience seem to come to this agreement that it's like, how can you trust? How can an AI trust but verify? That's sort of like this whole mentality between balancing sort of the human trust but verify, but then now the approach coming from an AI perspective.
Yeah, you're getting your 5059 screening qualification. An item comes up, requires 5059 screening. Okay, where in the 10 CFR is that? What page is that
Mhm.
requirement? Where in our FSAR
Mhm.
do I find that particular commitment
Yeah.
in our tech spec? Wouldn't it be nice to ask the question, get an immediate answer, and then get a link directly to the passage where that source of truth exists, and you didn't just spend an
Mhm.
hour going through a 2,000-page document?
Yeah. What do you mean? That's my favorite thing to do. It's 10 out of
Right.
10. I love it.
Yeah. So and it's hard
Yeah,
to replace
yeah.
people's jobs, but it's easy to replace the part of their job they don't like doing.
Yeah, I mean it replaces some jobs, but it also is creating others and it's improving efficiency, which can lead to some better quality of life at the end of the day, for a lot of different reasons.
So, about to wrap up. Thank you for your time. I do have a couple of food related questions I want to get into.
Ooh. Oh,
So,
okay.
I mentioned in the opening you're a fan of Mexican food, and I am right there with you. I live in Arizona. We have fantastic Mexican food, but I have to admit, my favorite Mexican restaurant of all time is El Charro in Ashland, Wisconsin, right on Lake Superior.
I
Shout out El Charro.
Okay, I've got family in Ashland, but okay, sorry, I'll let you finish before I dive into this.
The
But
molcajete is the best. That's all I wanted to
it's
say.
I don't know what it is. So I love Mexican food, as you said. And as Miss America, I traveled to 28 different states, I think it was. And in almost every single one, I was like, I need to try Mexican food here and like just see where the best Mexican food is. And honestly, I don't know if it's because it's like hometown bias or something. I still have yet to find one that beats Wisconsin and some of the like the local Mexican restaurants there. And like I've been to Texas and Arizona and like I've given Phoenix actually quite a few tries with different Mexican restaurants there. Some are good, but not great. And specifically, like I love chimichangas. I specifically am trying to seek out the best chimichanga in America. So if you are a Mexican business owner and believe you have the best chimichanga in America, I have tried numerous. So please let me know where you are and I will give you a score.
El
But
Gordo's in
yeah.
Tucson. El Gordo's
Ah,
in Tucson.
okay, okay. I have not made it to Tucson yet. That's one city that I've got to get to, but I'll make it there at some point.
So now you're on the East Coast, though.
Mhm.
So Philly cheesesteak with or without mushrooms.
Okay, hot take. I think Philly cheesesteaks are overrated. I just don't care for them. I really don't. Like it feels like middle school lunch slopped onto a roll and like I just can't. I really feel awful saying that because I've tried them numerous times, but every single time I'm just kind of like I don't know. I guess I expected more. I don't know. But I do. So no mushrooms. I would say though to answer the question, I hate mushrooms. I can't do them. The texture is really weird. I just can't do
Stop
them.
digging.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
You're,
And it's
you're
funny
gonna,
because I work in Kennett Square, so it's the mushroom
yeah,
capital of the world, and I'm like, I can't do it. I'm sorry.
yeah, you just got canceled in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I did. I did. I'll take my chances. It's okay.
All right. Well, before we
Oh.
wrap up, is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
The biggest thing is you may hear the words no, you may hear an answer that you don't want to hear, or sometimes a problem you don't want to hear, but there's always going to be a different avenue to finding an agreeable solution. And just remember, like the biggest thing that I feel like happens in America today is it ends up being this me versus you discussion, or something like that, that's both political and in workplaces and in like, hey, maybe you're trying to get a promotion and you're like, man, I got to go fight with HR real quick, right? Like at the end of the day, we're all people just trying to make the world a better place, just trying to do our job. We all have a common goal in that aspect. And maybe that's the optimist in me. I like to believe that people are good and inherently want to make the world a better place, which I feel like is something most people would agree with. But overall, remember that, keep that in mind when you have that no, when you have that frustrating moment, because there's always going to be a way to work with the other person, to work with the other group, to work with the other company, organization, whoever it may be, to find that solution that is a win-win for both parties. Maybe it's your regulator and you're a utility company, whatever it might be. You all have the same common purpose and common goal, and that's important to remember at the end of the day. But other than that, share your story. You all have some incredible experiences with energy, electricity, however it may be, whether you're just a listener and you don't work in the utility industry, great. What got you to learn about energy and electricity? Like that alone is a story that's worth sharing. But overall, share that story and remember that people are inherently good. We all just want to make the world a better place.
Yeah, I said it perfectly. It's a real treat to talk with you this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck in Kennett Square after that. We'll have to edit that out. There's just no way I can't
we
send you back to
we
work
can't keep that one.
with
No,
that.
it's okay. I say I'm pretty vocal about it here. Like people know. People know.
All right. Thank you,
Oh.
Grace.
All right. Thank you so much, Phil. I appreciate it a ton.